Ernest Holmes wrote, I live in the faith that there is a presence and a power greater than I am that nurtures and supports me in ways I could not even imagine. I know that this presence is all-knowing and all-power and is always right where I am. So I offer our affirmation for the month, which you can repeat after me or perhaps read on your screen. The divine feminine is in perfect balance with the divine masculine in me. I see the spirit shining in all beings across the gender continuum. I accept nurturing as strength. And so it is.
So it is. Thank you, Candace. Okay, I believe we have next Reverend Kathleen. Oh, yes. You know, and on Facebook the other day, I saw a post that really caught my attention and made me chuckle. This is what it said. It said, are you kind of feeling like Earth sent us all to our rooms to think about what we've done? Our divine mother, Mother Earth. Well, while I realize that this might not apply to all of us, because we do have some people who are, who have to continue to go to work for one reason or another, including the medical professionals who are dealing with the coronavirus epidemic. And let's just know that they are surrounded in the light and the love of God. Let's continue to send forth our prayers to all of them, and really to all of us who have to continue to work. And for the rest of us, though, it is a great opportunity. We have a unique opportunity to unplug, and that means to turn off the media, not this media, but to turn off the media, and to take time, not only with our families. Many of you are home with your families, and developing, making deeper connections with one another. But it's also a great time to up-level your spiritual practice, to really make a dedicated spiritual practice time every day, and to therefore meditate, pray, journal, pull out those books that you bought, maybe didn't have a chance to read, and really take time not to think about what we've done so much, as this post was talking about, but to examine what we believe. And if those beliefs serve us as well as the highest good or not. And so it's an opportunity to release some of those beliefs that have gotten in the way, and to really strengthen ourselves in spiritual truth. So let's start at the macrocosmic level about belief. What is your belief about the all that is? The presence that we call God, Source, infinite presence, whatever you call this one infinite universal life. We know that it is omnipresence. We've heard that: omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience. What does that mean? That means that presence is everywhere in its totality. It's indivisible at that level of the divine, at the level of source. It's indivisible, so it's present everywhere in its fullness. And so, and the scientists call it a unified field. So is there a remnant in your consciousness of thinking that old paradigm, the old paradigm of the male-only God with a long white beard sitting on the throne? If there's any little bit of remnant about that, it's time to expand that. It's time to really let go of that image and to allow something grander to come forth in your consciousness. So the thing is you may be sitting there saying, oh, I let go of that a long time ago. just notice what pronouns you use to describe this divine presence. If you're still using he only, instead of he, she, or it, then that might be an indicator there's still some that's remaining in your consciousness. And so this month we are looking at the idea that when we focus on the all that is as only masculine, then what we are doing is we're giving ourselves a subliminal message that the divine feminine is not included. And so since this all that is, this presence includes all, masculine and feminine, and is even beyond that, we want to put some focus now on the divine feminine aspect and bring it up to speed and bring it in our minds. It's already there, but in our minds, bringing it up together with that divine, that grand picture of the microcosm, the all that is. Because I truly believe, and many people believe, that the reason why we've gotten ourselves into this situation of war and epidemics and social injustice, economic injustice, inequality, and environmental exploitation is because of something that I'll be talking about a little bit later, toxic masculinity. It's not that the men themselves are responsible, I don't want to say that at all, but this toxic idea of what masculinity is. And so my intention today is to help us to dissolve that once and for all so that we all, male and female, can live in greater harmony together. So the topics that I'm going to cover are our true nature. You know, we often hear about nature versus nurture, or nurture versus nature. Well, I'm going to be talking about our true nature, and I'm going to be talking about nurture as strength. And then I'll be talking finally a little bit about toxic versus healthy masculinity, realizing that the masculine principle and the feminine principle reside in all of us. And so we want to bring that into greater balance within us. Our true nature. So think of words that describe us, that we often use to describe us. And I'm going to, since we're talking about the divine feminine, divine masculine principle, I want to talk about the descriptors that we use to describe our gender and our sexual orientation. So there are words like male, female, man, woman, lesbian, trans, bisexual, non-binary, cisgender, heterosexual, and gay, and so on and so on. Now, while these words describe an aspect of how we show up in human form, they don't even come close to describing our divine nature, our true nature. And so what we want to do then is take a look at what our true nature is. Let's just a reminder again. If the all that is, which is God, is unlimited in potentiality and possibility, it's the field of all possibility and all potential, and we are points of consciousness in that infinite universal presence or mind, then we have unlimited potential and possibility. So here's the thing, though, is that we're immersed in a human culture that over the millennium has socialized males and females to take on certain societal roles that are based on gender. And so the role of nurturer then has been assigned to all of those who identify as girl or woman or female. And only recently have women on a grand scale been embracing their inner masculine and developing those aspects of themselves, such as developing their talents in their careers and becoming more assertive. So when I was preparing for this message, I suddenly thought, this would be a great time to talk about that movie that's out right now called Little Women, because I think Little Women typifies and Joe is the one in particular, typifies women in the early days. Now, this goes back to the Civil War times, how they had longings, just like we do, to express their talents and their abilities in the world and to support their families, because in that time, the women had to support their families while the men were gone. And so Jo, as a writer, kept going to a certain publisher, and her work was acceptable enough to him to publish it, but she had to assume a male name as the author. And then finally, she decides to write a story about her family, which is mother and 4 daughters. And she writes it and she submits it to the publisher, and he says, "Oh, I don't think so. It's about women. People don't want to hear about women." And he puts it, I guess he sets it aside, and his daughters read it and they love it. And so he says, "Well, maybe this does have possibilities." So he finally allowed her to publish a book under her name and about women, realizing that women's lives are worthy of understanding. Their stories deserve to be heard. And then when she did marry, it was not a typical male-female relationship of those days. She married a man who took her work seriously. And so it's like the precursor of the new relationship between men and women, where they support one another in their spiritual unfoldment and in the sharing of their gifts. Another story that I thought of was, and this is another movie, is the story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And you know, in the early days, she really struggled. She was a very talented lawyer. She was at the top of her class. And yet when she went into the male-dominated world, she met with barriers every step of the way, and people who refused to hear her, to have her share her talents. She too had an atypical relationship with her husband at that time, where he supported her each and every step of the way. So only recently then have men on a greater scale been encouraged to share something that's been considered relegated to women, which is nurturing their children. And not only nurturing their children, acting as mentors for others and nurturing them and nurturing other people in their lives. And as a result, we're getting closer and closer and closer to both males and females experiencing their potentials and their wholeness. So again, to just summarize this part about nurture, words can describe us, but they do not define us. We must really stay rooted and founded and grounded in the awareness of our unlimited being, the unlimited nature of who we are. And also embrace the divine feminine as a valuable quality, equally as valuable as the masculine. So nurture. And this is about embracing the divine feminine. This is for males and females. Ernest Holmes writes that there is a presence and power greater than we are that nurtures and supports us in ways that we cannot even imagine. I'm paraphrasing it a little bit. And he says, it is always right where we are. Again, that non-local level of spirit is present everywhere in its fullness. It's important to remember that. And because we're made in the likeness and image of a nurturing presence, nurturing then is in our nature. It really is there. And when we deny it, we're denying a part of ourselves. So nurturing then, I'm going to give you a definition that I found that I found online. It says nurturing is the act of caring, loving, encouraging, cheering on, reassuring, and inspiring. It's an uplifting feeling. It's uplifting and it's believing in the other. So who must I nurture then to be that presence of nurturing? Who must I be to nurture the growth of myself and others? And notice I included myself in that because we must learn to nurture ourselves as well. So who must we be? We must be a person of strength and emotional maturity, a person of compassion. And here's the interesting thing about nurturing. It requires introspection, the willingness to observe and modify our own thoughts and behaviors and emotions to be able to be present with and care for others. Introspection, turning within. It requires courage, strength, and power. Any of you who have been doing this know that this is the truth. It takes so much strength. It is not for the weak and faint of heart. So radical self-care then is part of this introspective process. Meditation, prayer, visioning, to realize that it's really all about the evolution of consciousness. And that's, by the way, how I think of these challenges like the COVID-19 that's going on right now. All of these challenges are evolutionary drivers. That's the way to look at it. You know, we as students of Science of Mind and New Thought always look for the good. Like, what is the good in this? The good is that it's supporting us in evolving in consciousness and waking up and looking again, turning within. What is in me that I'm still holding on to that is being called to be released so that I can take a higher perspective and truly be a beneficial presence on the planet. So are you embracing introspection, or are you avoiding it by spending too much time, on TV, on the internet, whatever you're doing? This time of introspection is so essential to develop a nurturing consciousness, the divine feminine, which is being called forth in order to truly survive on this planet and to thrive. So the final thing I wanted to talk about was toxic masculinity versus healthy masculinity. Ernest Holmes says, never limit your view of life by any past experience. So toxic masculinity then is this is the definition. It's the adherence to the traditional male gender roles that restricts the expression of emotions and behaviors for boys and men. And the chief emotion of this traditional male gender role is anger. It's anger. Have been trained to go to anger as a way to stay in control. And so some of the other unhealthy aspects of the expression of this anger is it shows up as aggression, control, exploitation, misogyny, and dominance. The Me Too movement has really brought our attention to this destructive aspect of the expression of masculinity, this thing called toxic masculinity. And so many of us, I know, are re-examining that in ourselves because women, in the work world have taken on some of this toxic masculinity energy. So it's a time for all of us to look at that in ourselves. Nature provides a lot of examples of healthy masculinity, which is very cool. I found out that male gorillas, seahorses, penguins, and the greater flamingo, among others, all demonstrate nurture in their families. These are males that take on the nurturing role. So up until now, our boys and men have often been given unhealthy messages that nurturing and women who nurture are weak. Yet nurturing, we have just heard, requires courage, strength, and power. It also requires what's called a high emotional quotient, an ability to honor our emotions and express them intelligently and have compassion for others. So males have been trained or socialized to actually carry a low emotional quotient. And I'm not saying this is all males, but I'm saying those who have been socialized in the traditional male roles. And so again, that wreaks havoc in their relationships with other men, and their relationships with women, and with their families. So fortunately, and this has been going on for a while, there's been something called the men's movement. And I know some of the men in our congregation have participated in this. And this men's movement then is about unfolding this aspect called nurturing in men to help men to become more balanced. Men like James Hillman, he's a psychotherapist, and Robert Bly, who is a poet, among others, have held conferences since, I believe, the 1980s to help men break free from this toxic male, toxic masculinity, these traditional roles, and to instead embrace their wholeness. And that means they've been growing in this thing called emotional quotient, which is, we know, a strength. So, are you kind of feeling like Earth has sent you to your room to think about what you've done? I'm going to ask you to move beyond that and to realize that it's a great time to up-level in this consciousness of wholeness, in this idea of nurturing as strength, in learning maybe better ways of communicating and connecting with others. So as we do our introspection, our inner work, let us remember that we are not only doing it for ourselves and for our families and for people that we connect with. We are doing this work for the entire planet because we're all interconnected. We're all interconnected. So let's turn within in prayer, knowing that right here and right now, that the presence, the power, the life, the light, the source of all that is, which I call God, is all encompassing. It is the divine masculine and the divine feminine and beyond. That this source of all that is right here where I am and right where each and every person is, in its fullness and in its totality. And so I'm knowing that as we partake of the healthy divine masculine and the healthy divine feminine, as we begin to embrace nurture and nurturing others and ourselves as strength, I know that we are joining others across the planet in being the ones, being that difference that we wish to see in the world, that we are the ones who carry the light and the energy of love that we know is transforming our lives, transforming our families, transforming our planet, and that together we are truly co-creating heaven on earth, a world that works for everyone. So I release this word into the universal law of mind in full trust and in full thanksgiving that it is done, it is fulfilled, and so it is. Amen.
And so it is. Amen.